The wind came first slow and sighing, then cruel and sharp as it slipped under collars and bit bare cheeks. Snow fell in a steady hush, dusting the wooden platform of the train station like powdered bone. It clung to eyelashes, settled in the cracks of boots, and made the town feel more like a graveyard than a place folks lived. And that's when he came. Cade Rollins stepped down from his black gelding with the slow certainty of a man who never questioned the ground beneath him. Shirtless beneath a buffalo hide draped over one shoulder, his long blonde hair hung wet with snow, trailing like straw across the wind-chiseled planes of his face. His breath steamed, slow and heavy. No one met his eyes. They never did. People whispered about Cade, how he'd buried a family no one saw, how he spoke to no one unless absolutely required, how even the sheriff lowered his voice around him. A man who didn't flinch at blood, didn't drink, didn't smile, and didn't need much. He came to town twice a winter. Never stayed longer than an hour. Always alone. This time, he didn't leave. She sat on the edge of the platform, knees drawn to her chest, a woman carved from stillness. Her blanket was worn wool, stained and frayed at the seams. Snow lined the edge of her braid. Her hands were bare. Dark eyes stared at nothing. She didn't shiver. Naya Whitebird had arrived 3 days prior. The train left. She remained. No one offered her a room. Some said she was trouble, that she'd raised a settler's orphan and got thrown out by her people for it. Some said she was here for revenge. Some said worse. No one said it to her face. Cade saw her before the others did. Or maybe he just noticed longer. He tethered his horse, his massive frame rising like a monument through the white. Leather pants crusted with frost. Bare chest heaving slightly from the cold. Every step he took made sound, boots crunching frost, spurs kissing the wood. The townsfolk inside Caldwell's dry goods pressed to the window, breath fogging glass. Whispers flew like birds startled from trees. He's looking at her. Lord have mercy. She's not settler. She's not his kind. But Cade didn't look toward them. He walked straight to her. Naya didn't raise her head when he stopped in front of her. Didn't flinch when his shadow fell over her like a falling door. She kept her arms wrapped around her legs, kept her breath quiet. "Where's your coat?" Cade asked. His voice was low, rough. Like dry earth cracking. She said nothing. "I said. I gave it to a baby," she answered. Her voice wasn't timid, just spent. "She was colder than me." A pause. Cade reached up and pulled his hide from his shoulder. It was white and warm with the scent of tobacco and pine. He bent and draped it over her shoulders. She flinched, but didn't move away. Then came his words, slow and heavy like logs thrown on a fire, "You're coming with me." A gasp rippled behind the windows. A woman dropped her apron. Someone spilled coffee. Naya looked up for the first time. Her face was narrow, proud, wind-chapped. The kind of beauty that wasn't soft but stood its ground. Her eyes met his black against blue, and something passed between them. Not affection. Not relief. Recognition. She didn't nod. Didn't question. She stood. One bootless foot touched the snow. Then another. Cade reached for her pack, small, frayed, all she owned. She didn't hand it to him. But she didn't stop him either. They turned toward the waiting horse. She paused just long enough to cast a glance at the town, at the rows of shuttered windows and judgment folded behind curtains. A girl inside, no older than 6, whispered to her mother, "Mama, who's she?" Her mother answered, "Nobody we need to know." Cade heard it. So did Naya. Neither looked back. He helped her onto the saddle like it was nothing. One hand to her waist. She was light. Too light. She held onto the pommel instead of him. Cade mounted behind her. No words. Just weight and presence and heat. And then they were riding. Out into the storm. Out where no one could watch them like they were shame and scandal stitched into flesh. They disappeared past the trees, his bare chest against her back, her braid fluttering behind her like a flag of quiet defiance. The wind howled louder then. Not angry. Just hollow. As if the town, the windows, the watchers had all missed something important. And deep in the pine-lined silence, one figure remained at the edge of the platform, an old man with cloudy eyes and a fire-scarred hand. He watched them ride away and muttered, as if to no one, "A man like that don't bring someone home without reason." And no one answered him. Because no one ever asked what Cade Rollins saw when he looked at people. They only ever wondered what he might do next. And now he had someone with him. Someone no one wanted. Someone who had nowhere else to go. And for the first time in years, the man who'd lost everything had chosen not to leave alone. Snow had a way of erasing what came before. It covered hoofprints by morning and buried questions in its silence. By the time they reached Cade Rollins' ranch, the world behind them might never have existed. All that remained were two figures, one towering, one silent, disappearing into the white like they'd always belonged there. The house sat on a rise, built of dark timber and stone, square-jawed like the man who owned it. Smoke curled from the chimney in lazy strands. The porch creaked under their weight. Cade stepped off first, tied the gelding to the post, and then offered her his hand, not out of courtesy, but necessity. She took it. Inside, the air was warm but unlived in. One long table. One chair. A stove. A coat rack with only a hat on it. Dust coated a second plate on a shelf unused. Everything was quiet. Even the fire barely crackled. Cade set her pack down in the corner and didn't speak. He pointed to the bedroom down the narrow hall. "Yours now." "And you?" she asked. He nodded toward the hearth. "I sleep by the stove." She didn't protest. Didn't thank him. She simply turned, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door with the softest click. The next morning, he found his coat folded neatly on the bench, dry and smelling faintly of cedar. She was already outside, chopping kindling in bare feet. "Where are your boots?" he asked. "Didn't have room," she said, pausing to wipe her brow with the edge of her shawl. He left without a word. Rode to the shed. By midday, a pair of his mother's boots, small, fur-lined, cracked at the toes but clean, sat at her door. She never mentioned them. But she wore them every day after that. Cade watched her without seeming to. The way she moved, quietly, efficiently. The way she wrapped her fingers twice around a mug to warm them. The way she walked past the mirror without looking into it. She spoke little. Ate less. Slept with the door cracked open. Some nights, he woke to her pacing. Other nights, to the low murmur of her voice speaking a language he didn't understand. He never asked. She never offered. One evening, after she repaired a tear in the saddle blanket, she left a strip of blue cloth on the kitchen counter, folded, knotted, with a small white feather tucked into it. "What's this?" he asked. "For the gelding," she replied. He looked down at the bundle. Then at her. "That Apache?" She gave a nod. "Means strength that returns." Cade turned it in his hand. "You believe in things like that?" "I believe in things that endure," she said, then returned to darning his coat by firelight. Later that week, he rode into town. She stayed behind. At Caldwell's store, he stepped up to the counter. Juniper Caldwell greeted him with a look that tried to be pleasant but failed halfway. "Need flour, beans, and coffee," he said. "Anything else?" she asked, scribbling in her ledger. "Boot dye. Black." Juniper's hand froze. "For her?" He didn't answer. Just stared. She set it on the counter with a soft click. "Folk are watching, Cade. She's not your kind." "She ain't anyone's kind," he replied. "But she's here." He paid and left. The sack heavy with more than supplies. Back home, he found her by the stream, soaking fabric in cold water. Her sleeves were rolled, her hair pinned. She didn't turn when he approached. "Town's talkin'," he said. They've always talked. They said you were thrown out for talking in a settler child. That true? She paused. The water lapped softly at her fingers. Yes, she said. She was alone. So was I. And they hated you for it? They said I was no longer Apache. But the settlers don't call me theirs either. He crouched beside her, staring at the same moving water. So what are you now? She met his eyes. Here. That night, she placed the dyed boots beside the door. A storm rolled in after supper. Snow slapped the window panes, and the wind howled through the boards. Kate added another log to the fire and gestured to the rocking chair opposite his stool. You warm enough? I'm used to cold. You shouldn't be. She sat. Hands clasped. Face lit amber by the fire. Outside, the storm grew louder. Kate watched the flicker of her eyes against the flame. She watched nothing at all. I buried my family under snow like this, he said, voice hollow. Her head turned. 2 brothers. Little sister. Took em in after the fever. Didn't last the winter. She didn't offer comfort. Just silence. A respectful, unflinching silence. You ever lose someone? He asked. My mother. Then my name. He let that sit between them. It didn't need explaining. You believe in second homes? She asked. He looked at her. I believe in quiet, he said. She nodded. For a while, that was enough. In the weeks that followed, they fell into rhythm, not like lovers or friends, but like 2 wounds that learned not to rub raw against each other. She fed the chickens. He split the logs. She stitched the curtains. He cleared the paths. No questions, no permission. Just 2 people surviving under one roof where nothing had survived before. One morning, he found a strand of his hair woven into a band near the window. Strong. Knotted with white twine. He picked it up and smiled, not with his lips, but with something in his chest loosening. Later that day, she saw him wearing it around his wrist. Still, they didn't speak of it. But one night, he poured her a second cup of coffee without asking. And she drank it. That was something. The next trip to town, Sheriff Wilkes stopped him at the stable. Folks been complainin', Cade. About what? About you bringin' her here. Cade leaned against the post. She needs supplies same as any person. She ain't any person to them. Some say you're, well. You know how it sounds. I do. The sheriff scratched his beard, glanced around. You sure about this? Her? Cade looked him dead in the eye. She's the only quiet I've known that ain't empty. Sheriff Wilkes didn't reply. Just nodded and stepped aside. Back home, she didn't ask what happened. But that night, she left the door open wider than usual. And he sat closer to the fire. There was still distance. Still silence. But not the kind that hurt. Just the kind that healed slow. And outside, the snow kept falling. But for once, it didn't bury everything. Some things, it covered gently, like tracks not meant to vanish, but to lead you back home. Snow weighed heavy on the roof that night, as if the sky had lowered itself to listen. The wind no longer howled, just moaned low like a tired dog circling its bed. Inside the cabin, firelight cast long shadows against the walls, stretching Cade's figure into something both guardian and ghost. Naya sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a clay cup. She didn't drink. She just held it. Like she held everything else, quietly, tightly, and without complaint. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't the sharp-edged kind that came with strangers. Nor the brittle stillness of people avoiding the truth. It had become a softer thing. A shared silence. A silence that breathed. Cade had started watching her hands. They told stories her lips never bothered with. The way her fingers moved over seams, the way she turned a knife while chopping, how she held a broom like it was something sacred. Those hands had buried her past, no doubt. But they also tended things. His home, his horses. Him, in some small, unseen way. He began to speak more, but only in simple things. Stew's warm. Careful, steps icy. Fire needs more wood. And she'd answer in nods. Or gestures. Sometimes in one-word phrases that didn't need explanation. One day, he found her by the barn, murmuring in her own tongue to a limping mare. He didn't interrupt. Just stood at the doorway, watching her fingers stroke the creature's neck, slow and sure. Later that evening, she brought him a small bundle, crushed herbs, knotted in cloth. For pain, she said. Your shoulder still hurts when you split wood. He hadn't told her that. He took the bundle and tucked it into the inside pocket of his coat. You watch me close. You move like someone who hides their hurt. I've seen that before. Where? My brother. Before they took him. He didn't ask who they were. Some things were meant to remain unopened. Like graves. Like scars. He nodded once and poured her a second helping of stew. Winter stretched on. Storms came and went. Roads vanished beneath drifts so high the pines looked like fence posts. The world shrank to a cabin, 2 people, and whatever they built in silence. One afternoon, while Cade sharpened his axe in the yard, Naya came out with a folded cloth. She handed it to him, fingers grazing his just slightly. What's this? For your hands. The cold split them. He unwrapped it. Inside was a salve. Smelled of pine resin and something gentler, lavender, maybe. You made this? My mother taught me. He ran a thumb through the mixture. Smells like peace. She tilted her head, almost smiled. Then use it before you ruin what's left of you. He did. That night, he placed a wooden carving on the windowsill, small, unfinished, a horse's head beginning to form. She noticed it the next morning. You carved this? My pa taught me. I ain't touched a blade for art since he died. Why now? He shrugged. Because you're here. The fire popped then. A pine knot burst. But neither of them flinched. It was the first real stillness they'd shared without walls around it. The next day, he returned from checking the trap lines to find the floor swept, the curtains repaired, and something unfamiliar baking in the oven. It smelled sweet. He stood in the doorway watching her, the late afternoon light making a halo of her dark braid. You've made this place your own, he said quietly. I've just cleaned what was always yours. He stepped forward, boots slow on the plank floor. It don't feel like mine anymore, not without you in it. She turned at that, slowly. Her eyes searched his face like they didn't quite believe what they'd heard. I don't belong anywhere, Cade. I was told that enough times. You belong here, he said. The words hung between them. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just true. She looked down, hands folded tight. I don't know how to stay. You're doing it, he said. Every day you don't run. She didn't speak after that. Just nodded once, and went back to baking. That night, she placed 2 plates at the table instead of 1. And for the first time since she'd arrived, they ate at the same time. By lamplight. Facing each other. 2 exiles slowly remembering how to be human again. Later, while the fire burned low, Cade brought out a folded blanket from a trunk in the back of the cabin. He handed it to her without a word. She ran her fingers over the stitching. Your mother's? He nodded. Made it when I turned 15. Said I'd need it when I found someone who made the house warmer. Naya didn't answer. But she wrapped it around her shoulders that night as she sat by the fire. The air between them no longer felt like a question. Just a waiting room for something that didn't need to be rushed. But not everyone approved of quiet things becoming real. A knock sounded the next morning. Sheriff Wilkes stood in the snow, hat in hand. She's still here? He asked. Cade nodded. She is. Town council stirred up. Said she's not to come into Caldwell's no more. She hasn't. Doesn't matter. They saw her once. That was enough. Cade said nothing. Just stared. I'm just passin' the word, Wilkes added. But they'll be lookin' for a reason to make this louder. Cade looked past him, at the horizon buried in white. They'd rather watch a man die quiet than let a woman live decent. Wilkes tipped his hat. Just be careful. After he left, Cade found Naya at the well. Her back straight, her breath thick in the air. She didn't look at him when he approached. You heard? I always do. He stood beside her, silent. Maybe I should go, she said. You should do what you want. I don't know what that is. Then stay till you do. Her shoulders sank, barely. I'm not yours, she said softly. He didn't answer right away. No, he said finally. But I'd still build you a place if you needed one. That night, she didn't close her door. And in the silence that followed, neither of them moved. Because sometimes the softest things make the loudest promises. And the snow, for once, let them hear every unspoken word. The snow had begun to melt in streaks, revealing patches of stubborn earth beneath. But with the thaw came another kind of exposure. What the cold had buried was now open again, tracks, truths, and the words people thought wouldn't be heard. The town didn't forget Naya Whitebird. They just waited to say more. It started when she followed Cade to town for supplies. Her boots were freshly dyed, her braid tied in white twine. She walked with him, just behind, never beside. She knew how townspeople arranged themselves, always in shadows, always a step away from judgment's eye. But judgment found her anyway. The moment they stepped into Caldwell's store, it began. Juniper Caldwell stopped shelving molasses and stared. She ain't allowed here, she said, louder than necessary. Cade kept walking. Set a sack of coffee beans on the counter. Naya stood near the door, hands folded. Juniper didn't take the money. You're gonna have to choose, Mr. Rollins. Cade's jaw shifted slightly. Choose what? Juniper's voice quivered with false gentleness. Whether you want to keep your standing or waste it on someone who brings nothing but trouble. Cade looked at Naya. She didn't flinch. But her hands tightened. He reached for his coin pouch. She's here with me. That's the only standing I care about. Juniper's lips pressed thin, but she took the money. Word traveled fast. By the time they reached the edge of town, children had been pulled indoors, eyes darted behind curtains, and a man on a bench muttered, that Apache girl should have stayed where she was exiled. Naya said nothing the whole way home. Her silence was no longer soft. It was cracked. When they reached the ranch, she didn't go inside. She walked toward the barn instead. Cade dismounted, followed, gave her space. She stood staring at the horses, eyes wet but dry on her cheeks. She didn't cry in front of him. She never had. You didn't have to defend me, she said finally. Yes, I did. No, she said. You had to decide. You did. That's different. He leaned against the beam beside her, arms crossed. You knew they'd talk, she said. I didn't care. I did. He looked at her now, fully. Her shoulders, usually square, were sloped inward. The defiance that made her walk through snow barefoot had turned inward. I don't belong here, Cade. You don't belong to them. Then who do I belong to? The words lingered too long. I didn't mean, she started, but the break was already there. You're not a burden, he said quietly. But I'm still trouble. He stepped forward, close enough to share breath, close enough that her pain touched the front of his coat. You're only trouble to folks who never knew what it meant to be saved. Her eyes met his. Don't put that on me, she said, soft but sharp. I didn't save you. He nodded. Maybe not. But you're the only one who didn't let me die. She turned away then. That night, she didn't eat. She sat by the window, eyes on nothing. Cade set her plate beside her. She didn't touch it. He didn't press. In the morning, she was gone. Her pack was missing. So was the coat he'd given her that first day. No note. No trace. Just absence. And a cold wind through the cabin that no fire could ease. Cade searched the stables. The barn. The nearby trees. No sign. Her tracks were faint, half covered by new snow, but they pointed north. He didn't saddle his horse. He followed on foot. The trail wound past the stream, through frozen reeds and under the grove of whispering aspens. It was there he found her. Sitting alone. Cloaked in the coat. Knees drawn up. Facing the mountains. "I didn't think you'd follow," she said without turning. "I didn't think you'd go. I had to." "Why?" "Because you were starting to look at me like I belonged. And I don't." He sat beside her, slow and stiff from the cold. They sat in silence a long while. "Do you know what it's like," she said finally, "to be everyone's mistake?" He nodded. "Yes." She looked at him. "I loved a settler child once. I was the only one who'd feed her. Hold her. The tribe said I was weakening our line. They gave me a choice. The child or my name. You chose her." "I did." "She die?" "She lived. But she forgot me." Cade looked away. "That's what they do. The ones you give everything to." The wind picked up. He turned to her again. "But I remember." She closed her eyes. "What if I stay," she said softly, "and they never stop calling me trouble?" "Then let 'em. If you're gonna be blamed, might as well be blamed for something worth it." She let out a quiet breath, nearly a laugh. "They'll keep shunning me. They already do. They'll think less of you. They already do." She looked at him now, truly looked, and something fragile passed between them. Not love. But the soil where love could grow. "If I come back," she said, "I need to do it on my own terms." "You can walk beside me this time," he said. "Not behind." She blinked once. Then stood. They walked home slowly, their tracks side by side. And in the town, the stories began again. But this time, she didn't flinch when she heard them. She had chosen not to vanish. And that changed everything. Snow fell again the day they returned. Not the sharp, stinging kind that cut sideways in anger, but soft and steady, like a curtain being drawn over what came before. The kind that made everything feel new, if only you knew how to see it. Cade walked ahead, steps deliberate, shoulders square. Naya walked beside him, not behind, wrapped in the same buffalo hide coat he'd given her weeks ago. They didn't speak, but something had changed between them, something in the quiet, in the way their footsteps matched, in how she no longer looked back. The town watched. Windows fogged with breath. Doors cracked just wide enough for suspicion to squeeze through. Whispers slipped from mouths like steam from teacups. They'd seen her leave, and now she was back. With him. Again. Trouble returned. They passed the sheriff first, sitting on the bench by the livery, rubbing his palms together like he wasn't sure what to say. "You sure about this, Rollins?" he asked, not unkindly. Cade didn't stop. "I was sure the first time." Sheriff Wilkes nodded, a quiet sort of respect hiding behind his mustache. Then walked tall. At the church, the bell rang for the midday gathering. Preacher Hoyt stood at the top step, Bible open, voice echoing over frost and gossip. "Today we read the names of those who belong to this town. And those who do not." Cade's boots stopped on the wooden steps. Naya stood beside him, eyes calm. Preacher Hoyt continued, hesitant. "Let it be known that some have taken liberties, bringing outsiders into homes meant for good settler blood. Let it be known that her name is—" "Stop." Cade's voice cracked across the space like a rifle shot. Every head turned. If you say her name like it don't belong here, then take mine off that list too. A murmur ran through the crowd. Preacher Hoyt lowered the Bible slowly. Son. I'm no one's son, Cade said. I buried my family in your ground. I rebuilt my home with no help. I've asked nothing of this town but quiet. He took one step up. She kept to herself. Hurt no one. Fed my horses. Mended what was broken. You call that trouble? Juniper Caldwell stepped forward, face pinched tight. She don't belong here, Cade. And if you keep her, then I don't belong either. Gasps. The kind that tried to slap shame onto a man's chest. But Cade didn't flinch. He reached into his coat and pulled something small from his pocket, a white hair tie, frayed and knotted, one of the first things she ever left for him. He held it up, not to the preacher, not to the townsfolk, but to her. Maybe I never said it right, he said. But I'd rather walk with you through every door slammed in our face than sit easy in a place that's never had room for people like you. Naya didn't speak. Didn't move. The town seemed to lean forward. And then, in the silence that followed, she stepped up beside him. Only this time, she took his hand. Not as a statement. Not to prove anything. Just because she wanted to. That was the moment the world cracked a little. Preacher Hoyt looked at them long, and something in his face softened. His voice was quiet now. Let it be known, then, that names written in snow melt fast. And names written in love might just outlast the season. He closed his Bible. No one clapped. No one shouted. But the moment held. Later that afternoon, back at the ranch, Cade opened the drawer beside the bed. He pulled out a simple band, a silver ring, dull and dented, his mother's. He set it on the table between them. No speech. No flourish. Just the quiet placement of something that had waited too long. Naya stared at it for a long moment. Then she looked at him. He didn't ask. She didn't speak. But she reached across the table, picked up the ring, and slid it onto her finger. Outside, the snow fell thicker, erasing the prints of those who had come and gone before. Inside, two people sat in silence. But now, that silence was full. Not of loneliness, but of something deeper. Home. And maybe, just maybe, something like forever. The wind brushed against the window, soft as a blessing, as if the storm itself had finally bowed its head. And somewhere in that great wide stretch of white, the world whispered back. Yes. Sometimes it isn't love that saves a person. Sometimes it's a place at the table. A coat draped on shivering shoulders. A hand not refused when the whole world's watching. You, listening now, what would it take for you to be brave like that? To carry someone's name when no one else will? To walk through snow, and shame, and silence, just to earn a single yes,